a range of traded coals. And as you see here, ours is in the orangey diamond. And as you see here, we're in the lower end of total moisture, which is excellent. We're in the lower end of ash, as I said, one of the lowest ash coals out of Mongolia. The volatiles, it's near perfect. I think I'd have to say that UHG's and probably TT's volatiles are actually in the absolutely perfect range, which is just in there. That's probably perfect, around 22 to 24%. We're about 25 to 28%. Our sulphur is on the high side, but well within the normal parameters of a traded coking coal. Our CSNs are top of the range, as you see, as is our Grey King Index. So by all accounts, this is a terrific coal. But what we need to be mindful here is that, like, no matter what it is, it's a bulk commodity and it needs a clear and efficient path to market. And this is where I'm talking about development of northern Mongolia, and I think our Avut project can really drive that development. What it needs is a rail line. Up to 2006, official government policy included a rail line connection from Erdenet to Moron. It was removed for very good reason, because the government focused on the new discoveries and the new developments that were happening in the south of the country as being ways in which government revenues can be more quickly accelerated. And there were no other large new coal or other project developments and discoveries in the northern part of the country. We believe since last year we've changed that picture dramatically. We did have Calibre Rail confirm. Calibre Rail are global bulk commodity rail experts. They did confirm that there was a feasible path from our Avut project through to Erdenet, and it's very important. Elagast to the north of us is 1 billion tonnes of reserve of hard coking coal, and it's not being developed at this point because the path is difficult, to say the least. We also believe that there are potential other users of rail between Moron and Erdenet. Apart from the community, which would benefit significantly, the livestock herders will get better prices for their product, creating a meat industry in Moron, advancing tourism significantly by giving greater access than the flight, one little flight a day that goes there. All these things have a dramatic impact on a large number of people. But it's the projects in the area which have been known for quite some time, but now have a path to market. And in particular, I want to refer you to the Burunhan Phosphate project, which is here, just near Moron. That is a world-class, high-grade phosphate project that not many people outside Mongolia is aware of. Phosphates have had a fantastic price growth, just like coking coals over the last few years, and that is a fantastic asset that has really has been looked at and developed, and feasibility studies done by Russia in the early 80s, and because there's no rail line, has sat there. In addition, there's new discoveries of iron ore, copper moly, and as I mentioned, continuing discoveries in coking coal, and I mentioned the Nersti discovery there near Moron is just one. So there's a number of different customers for this rail. We actually think that between Avut and Burunhan, we're 90% covered already for full capacity of that rail line before we start finding out any other new discoveries in the region. Adding a rail line will have a dramatic impact on the lives of people in northern Mongolia, and particularly I'm focusing on the people around the Hufsgal province. For a start, generally speaking, the product... I'll come back. One of the real benefits of developing northern Mongolia is your focus to the north rather than to the south, and particularly this part of the rail line going north. That rail line is largely underutilised. As the further you go south, particularly south from Ulaanbaatar, the more heavily used that rail line is, and at the moment it is quite full. But going north, there is a significant amount of capacity. And so developing these assets will see utilisation of that underused rail capacity on the TMR heading north. There are 125,000 people in Hufsgal province, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but in Mongolia that's actually the most populous province in the country outside UB. The population density in Hufsgal province is 2.5 people per square kilometre. Again, doesn't sound like a lot, but in the South Gobi it's a half a person. 30 kilometres away from our discovery, there are 550 registered unemployed people. 30 of those are university graduates. And excellent high schools pumping out kids every year, and they either go to UB or they add to that unemployment list. There hasn't been the resource development in the northern part of the country to absorb these people. And they're well-educated people, but as I said, high unemployment. 83% of the GDP in Hufsgau province is agriculture. It's livestock, husbandry. Mainly because there just simply is no other alternative. These developments in the country are broad-based. They're not just coal, it's phosphates, it's copper, it's tourism, and it's livestock. And that will generate, particularly the resource aspect, will generate significant royalties and tax revenues, probably not being considered when people have been focusing on what's happening in the south. The other important thing strategically, it changes the balance of exports out of Mongolia. It actually increases exports through to Russia and through to, we believe, other countries using the Russian rail system. It's poised for that, and I think as time goes on with more and more development in the south, the acuteness of that imbalance will continue to grow. And obviously there are other benefits, and our previous speakers talk about the very important contributions resource projects need to make locally in terms of health, education, water, sewerage, etc. And interestingly enough, the provincial governor and the provincial government of Hufsgau province actually has this rail line in its development plan for 2015, and we hope not to disappoint him. This is a map of Russian rail system, or at least it's a massive rail system, but I've highlighted the paths to particularly coal terminals in the country. And you probably haven't seen this map before, because all the other maps we've looked at here all show the Chinese rail system. This is the Russian rail system. I also want to point you to the fact that the Kurbas Basin is in there. It's probably the worst place in the world in Russia to have have half your coal resources and reserves, because you're right in the middle of a huge country. Nevertheless, they have established a significant business based on that. The distance from Kurbas Basin to Vostochny in the Far East is some 6,000 kilometres. The distance from Norsky, which is in just the top there of the Trans-Mongolian, around to Vostochny is around 3,500 kilometres. Our proposition is that we would export coal, coking coal, at the top end of the range of value from Norsky through to Vostochny, and at a tariff which makes sense for Russian rail and obviously for our commercial requirements. And I believe that's absolutely possible, given the fact that exporters from the Kurbas Basin export some 20 million tonnes of thermal coal, 6,000 kilometres along that same rail line. It also opens up possibilities, I believe, particularly in a high coking coal price environment, to delivering coal through to Eastern Europe and the very high growth market of Turkey. Excuse me. Interestingly enough, just a couple of months ago, Energy Resources did a trial shipment of coking coal. They trucked it from UHG mine to station at Choi, railed it up to Norsky, and then railed it along the Trans-Siberian into the Russian rail system and delivered it to Poland, to ThyssenKrupp. I'm not aware of how successful that was, but the fact that it's actually being done and considered suggests that there's a belief in some metrics that it may well work. So I believe, and this is about development of not just a Vought, this is about all those assets I'm talking about in northern Mongolia, and for that matter, coking coals in Mongolia itself, that we have four paths to market. The four paths are the red line through there, which is along the Trans-Mongolian directly into China. And at the moment, it may surprise you, there isn't any coal being exported down that line at all. All the exports of coal are occurring by trucking across the border. And until the TT line is actually completed, that will probably continue over the next few years. The next path to market would be through the yellow line, which is out through to Far East Russian ports. And I believe that's more than viable, given reasonable tariffs from Russian rail. The third path is through actually into northern China, which starts going up through Russian rail into what they call a Manjuli crossing, which was recently opened by China Rail to allow for coal imports into China. The Chinese are actually looking at this in a very sensible way, in that everyone's talked about the massive logjam of coal in northern China, and it's there, and it's one of the reasons why Mongolian coals do not get the price it should, given the quality of the product. So it's locked up in here where there's a greater supply than demand. The problem is down here there's a greater demand than supply, and therefore they're the captive to the seaborne market. China policy is actually to see coals come out, miss this bottleneck and come out through ports, and there's one port there in particular called Dandong, which is near North Korean border, which they are encouraging not necessarily to export to Korea and Japan, but to actually ship it to coastal receival points for the Chinese steel industry. So that's the third path. And the fourth path, and given strong coking coal prices, the green line heading west. And as I said, we've had certainly some interest, and I think last year we met some representatives of the Turkish steel industry here who are just very keen to talk about developments in Mongolia. Just one other point I've heard from time to time, which is the Russian coal companies will never let you access their ports because you'll compete with them. The fact of the matter is, and this data is a little bit dated, but it solves the point, and it shows the point. In 2009, Russia only exported 4 million tonnes of coking coal out of its Far East Pacific ports. They export a lot of thermal coal, and to think that if they had 1 extra tonne of coking coal to put along that 6,000 kilometres, they would. So what I'm essentially saying is they're selling everything they can and then some, and therefore we would not be taking any share from them. So quickly, in summary, about our overt coking coal project, it's a large resource with thick seams. It's a high quality coking coal. It's because of the thick seams, we believe a large production of up to 12 million tonne per annum is possible, based on an 80% yield and a 15 million tonne run-of-mine production. So it's large production, obviously large resource, high quality, and therefore we believe will help develop and backstop a development of rail in this part of the world, and it's something we're certainly working very hard on.